Two Davids Walk Into a Bar is filmed in front of a live studio audience.
Go ahead. Buy a video this weekend. 16 of your favorite movies are on sale from $24.95 to $19.95.
Such a nice number.
Get in on the action with MGM UA Home Video.
High five, more dead than alive. Rocking the plastic like a man from a casket. High five, more dead than alive. Rocking the plastic like a man from a casket.
Hello, you're listening to Two Davids Walk Into a Bar. I'm David Anderson, and with me, as always, is David Lawler. How are you today?
I'm fine, and you're fine, I'm assuming, 3,000 miles away. We're in the middle of a hurricane right now. How about that?
Yeah, right in the middle of us, actually. I mean, between the two of us, I mean, it's in Texas right now. Shout out to Chris Cooling. Hope you're okay.
Yes, Chris Cooling, www.forgotten.tv.
Yeah,
and all of my friends, a lot of my friends moved to Texas for some reason, but I hope they don't regret it tonight.
No, don't mess with Texas.
What are we talking about, Dave?
We're talking about MGM UA and all of its permutations.
1924, movie theater magnate Marcus Lowe had a problem. I don't know what his problem was, and I don't think it had much to do with purchasing major motion picture companies, but he bought Metro Pictures Corporation in 1919 for a steady supply of films for his large Lowe's theater chain. They didn't make many good films that were making any money. So what do you do when you're at the beginning of, this is kind of like a Genesis episode of an alien movie or something. You just go and start buying other companies. And this started in 1924 when Lowe purchased Goldwyn Pictures. And that was run by Samuel Goldwyn. And then a guy named Louis B. Mayer was talking to Lowe, and he addressed the situation by, I guess, purchasing Mayer's own Mayer Pictures on April 17, 1924. This is when it all comes together. This is when George Peppard has his cigar out. And Mayer became head of the renamed Metro Goldwyn Mayer. So you have these three companies all coming together. With
this around the same time that that Fox merged with 20th Century and became 20th Century Fox? Was this all kind of happening around the same time?
Yes, as a matter of fact, 5 years later, William Fox bought the Lowe's family holdings.
Okay.
So I mean, like, everybody was trying. Fox tried to buy MGM in 1929. At that point, they still had Irving Thalberg as head of production. Irving Thalberg is the guy who they give the honorary Oscar to a person every year named after him.
Yeah.
So when William Fox bought the Lowe's family holdings, both Louis B. Mayer and Irving Thalberg left. They didn't want to be a part of that deal, that merger. But the name, he even sued. I believe he sued to have his name removed, as did Goldwyn from MGM. But since MGM became a corporation, they had the right to keep that name. Where do we go from there? In 1925, we have Ben-Hur, which becomes their first big budget production. But it was still black and white. Now, the MGM started experimenting with Technicolor, and it wasn't 3-strip yet. It was a 2-strip Technicolor with 2 films that were made. It was more kind of a tinting thing that was going on back then. Mm-hmm. The Rogue Song and The Cat and the Fiddle. It's like, these are musicals and everything. MGM is kind of known for its musicals. But The Rogue Song was the first movie to be all color and all talking in 1930. And in 1934, MGM concluded a sequence made in a Technicolor's superior new 3-color process, which would become famous with a movie like Gone with the Wind. But this was a movie called The Cat and the Fiddle. It again, more of a tinting process. Starring Jeanette MacDonald and Ramon Navarro, who is like this incredibly popular star back then. This guy
I never heard of him.
Yes, I know. I never heard of. Well, I've seen. If you saw his face, you would probably recognize him in like those old documentaries about old timey Hollywood.
But then, I think we had a conversation. I can't remember when we had a conversation about this, but there is a huge amount of Hollywood history that is just gone because the film is disintegrated to nothing. So there are lots of stars we just don't know because they had a bunch of films and they're just not around.
But for now, we're into the time of Gone with the Wind. Mm-hmm. And according to my notes here, MGM produced around 50 pictures a year. A lot of all those films would wind up in Lowe's theaters. And Lowe's Theaters, mostly located in New York, the Northeast, Deep South. The Grand Theater in Atlanta was the setting for the premiere of Gone with the Wind. This is considered one of the greatest movies of all time, apparently. I'm not a big fan. I had to discuss this with Geno recently for an episode that we did, just a separate episode about things.
Yeah, which I'm looking forward to listening to, actually.
It's a lot of work. Believe me, it's a lot of work. I haven't even started editing yet because I had to record some new stuff.
It is literally the Gone with the Wind of podcasts.
Yeah, I guess so. Now, Gone with the Wind is a movie that I remember my mother absolutely loving, and every time it would show up on TV, I believe around Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah, it was sort of a double whammy event of Gone with the Wind, I guess around Thanksgiving, and then around Easter would be Wizard of Oz. Both from the same studio, both came out in the same year. Wizard of Oz was kind of a flop. Gone with the Wind is still the biggest hit of all time, adjusted $390 million, and that's old money. That's not new money. So we're talking close to $2 billion US alone.
Well, so, I can go into my problems with Gone with the Wind on this one because we are talking about MGM. I'm going to be hypercritical. I had to be respectful when I was talking about it with Geno because we were talking about several films that have perennially, been banned or been threatened to be banned by certain groups. Gone with the Wind is considered controversial for whatever. I don't know. People need to get over themselves. Anyway, I found the movie stupid. I mean, it's 3 hours, and we're basically looking at it from the point of view of a very unlikable character who has, I guess, a sense of inner pride, but also hot, lusty, savage Southern woman who just wants everything, and she wants it right now. She kind of reminds me of a millennial very much. Scarlett O'Hara is kind of like a millennial. Like, you say anything that she disagrees with it, and Lord Almighty, she gets the vapors, falls down. She wants Ashley. She doesn't get Ashley. The character the two characters I really like in the movie are the one that Melanie, Olivia de Havilland's character, and Rhett Butler, played by Clark Gable, and you can admire the scope of the movie. I think what's more interesting about it is what's going on around Scarlett, not with her life, and the color and the way it's shot and the way it all kind of comes together. It's never boring. And I'll give it that. It's never boring.
It's on MGM UA Home Video. It's probably on Warner Home Video now because we'll have a conversation about Ted Turner being bought by Ted Turner bought the movies and then he got bought by Warner Brothers.
Yes, sir. This is Ted Turner, sir.
Yeah,
this is one night you're not turning me down, Scarlett.
And I think that
I want to talk about 1 second. I want to talk about the two laugh out loud moments in the movie. The one is the beginning, right before the first intermission. Scarlett goes out to her land and says, as God is my witness, I will never go hungry again. Picks a raw turnip out of the ground, eats it, and then throws it up. And then we fade to black and intermission. And the second moment is where Rhett Butler says, "You're not turning me down tonight, Scarlett," and proceeds to rape her. And she wakes up in the morning like a cat that swallowed a canary. And it's just, I gotta wonder, is this not a little bit offensive?
It is, but I was just going to say right before you said that, and this goes right into it. It's kind of this weird sort of. It's not only a time capsule of the Old South, but it's a time capsule of the time when people romanticized that kind of thing. And if you watch something more modern about the Old South, it shows
women like to be chased. They're like animals.
It shows a much more. If you watch something now, it shows a much more realistic point of view of it was not good.
Like Scarlett kicking Rhett's nuts. Rhett clutching his nuts and falling to the ground.
If you watch,
you bitch, you kick me in the nuts.
There was
suddenly Cartman, yes.
Man, can I watch Gone with the Wind?
And then we cut. Wait, let's cut to Rhett in the morning having breakfast with Scarlett, and his voice is just a little bit higher. Would you like some coffee, Rhett?
Okay, sorry.
All right, go ahead. Make your point. What was?
It's just the point is that what was my point? I forgot. We were talking about
about seeing Gone with the Wind, about something.
Seeing Gone with the Wind, and it's. I think people. It's. There was a remake of Roots. It was on like cable or something.
They remade it, really?
They remade it, and it was now the original Roots is actually it's a very television movie kind of production, but yet the message and what they were trying to do, it's a very important film, and it's actually a really good film, and it's a very
it's a very well made television movie, high quality, good production values, very expensive.
For what they could do, it's actually
it's apocryphal. It's not completely truthful, but it is a very effective.
But
movie.
it gets you right in the feels anyway.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah. I mean, well, it's a hell of a lot better than 12 Years a Slave. Yeah.
Yeah, and so does the sequel. Is actually even it can. I think the sequel, the roots, like when it continues the story of, and then it ends on Alex Haley and he goes to Africa. And it kind of ends there, so it's like, because you remember, like, the original Roots started, it started in Africa, and then it continued to about, like, say, the end of slavery, and then the sequel goes the end of slavery to actually ends at Alex Haley, actually.
Right.
So, and then he goes to Africa at the end. And it's kind of a good bookend, and it's actually very touching. So I would say anybody wants to feel bad about being white or hate white people, watch Roots and get it in the feels.
There's enough of that in the world today, my friend.
Yes, but there's a remake of Roots, which it was actually more well made. It was more cinematic. It more historically accurate. I think they got few more details in. It doesn't quite hit you in the feels as much, but it's also very good for what it's trying to do. But it kind of shows that, like, things were not good. Really, even for people that you would think it would be good, like the white people, the well-off white people, things were not good for anybody at all. Things were uncomfortable and hot. I mean, we live in such a nice, clean, comfortable world now.
A few years back, let me see, I think I might have been still working a Blockbuster, but a new restored widescreen version of Ben-Hur, the 1959 movie with Charlton Heston, was released on video. And I brought it home and I watched it. I was absolutely enthralled. I loved that movie. I thought it was fantastic.
Was this on VHS?
This was a VHS. This was around the time when movies were being released widescreen, very good quality, remastered, restored for VHS, and I believe that was part of the way of competing with Laserdiscs.
I just realized it's like,
because you could just pop it into your machine. You don't really have to. I mean, it's lacking a lot of the extra bonus features of a Laserdisc, but it still gives you pretty much a very good picture.
Ben-Hur was shot in a special anamorphic 70mm format where you literally, it was the same thing they used for what's the newest?
Hateful Eight you're talking about?
Hateful Eight, yeah. It's the aspect ratio isn't just regular Panavision 2.4 to 1. It's 2.76 to 1.
Yes, it's just extremely wide.
Almost 3 to 1 wide picture.
At the
and you're
time,
watching it on VHS. It's probably not going to look great. That's kind of when you need Laserdisc.
I want to say this is 96 or 97. I think we had like a 27. We topped out at a 27-inch tube at the time, but it looked fine. I mean, God, and it had a stereo soundtrack, and it was amazing to listen to. It came. It did come in the big box, and I mean, like the double box.
It was a two taper. There was
it wasn't
that one.
Yeah,
tape.
Which is good because you know we talked about like Dances with Wolves before, but that's a movie that would really snap because the tape would be so thin because you're holding 3 hours on.
Yeah,
I heard
there were complaints with those.
You would have a problem. So, and this is broken up into a presentation. You know, like Gone with the Wind is actually too. They throw in an intermission. You know, and go out, have your cigarette, drink your orange juice, and come back in and watch the second half if you want to.
Well, you could smoke in the theater then.
Well, yeah.
They didn't care.
Insert Max Cady.
Watching Problem Child.
So, but this was a remake of the 1925 movie and starred Charlton Heston, and Charlton Heston always freaking amazing.
Charlton Heston, before he went into full Chuck Heston making fun of himself mode, when you get into
like Planet of the Apes, Soylent Green, Omega Man, that kind of stuff.
Planet of the Apes is, I'd say, he's almost good in that he's such a douche in that movie that it kind of fits. But then
he's a douche in Soylent Green too. I mean,
well, yeah, but that's when he starts. That's when he's full Chuck Heston. Oh my God, what is going on here?
You truly are the king of kings. Ben-Hur wound up winning 11 Academy Awards, which was the record until Titanic broke it, and then Well, actually, Titanic matched it, but Lord of the Rings broke it, apparently. The Return of the King. I don't understand why. I think that's the weakest of the three. I really like Two Towers.
We're going to have we may have to do a special sideshow about that because you're wrong on it.
Jesus. Well, let's stop here for a minute and talk a little bit about now as the companies are going to start to merge. Let's launch into a little bit of UA, United Artists. Now, this was a studio that was founded by, if I get my name straight, Charles Chaplin, D.W. Griffith, Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks.
Douglas Fairbanks Sr.
And they all came together. I think this was a bid by actors of the time. These were the most popular actors of their time to be taken, to get away from studio control. Because studios back then owned actors. They put them under contract.
Not only did they own actors, didn't they own all the theaters too? Kind of like when we were talking about the history of MGM. Like they
the whole thing was a monopoly.
Buy theaters to show their content in.
Yeah, that was part of the. That's why in the late 50s you started seeing antitrust lawsuits going back and forth with theaters. They believed, I guess, independent theater chains wanted more control over theaters, and they formed their own marketplace. I think the Theater Distributors of America, because they said they didn't like studios having a monopoly on
Would
major
that be
theaters.
the originator of the Motion Picture Corporation of America, or different? Is that a different?
The MPAA, yeah. United Artists started out like that. This is actors were still being controlled by studios, and they weren't really paid as much. It's very interesting. It's kind of like how like sports, baseball, football, they're all getting paid enormous, ridiculous, lucrative salaries, given lucrative contracts, because everyone is considered an independent contractor now. No one's actually an employee of a corporation. Now, back then, those guys were employees of corporations until they got out of their contracts. They all put their heads together and said, let's start something that can be controlled by the artists. And that was the big thing with United Artists.
Well, wouldn't they have like executives that kind of had like the money people there to kind of be tightwads to make sure that like stuff got done.
But the tightwads wound up loosening up quite a bit.
Yeah,
because they wound up spending more money and having more control.
We'll get to a James Bond conversation probably later, but they were so tight with that James Bond money, at least at first. Like they gave them like we'll give you $500,000 and then you put up $500,000. That's how they made Dr. No. They made that for like just a little over $1 million.
All the other studios didn't operate the way UA did because UA gave so much power to the creative types. The executives took a back seat to the talent for a long time, and it really did work out incredibly well. United Artists wound up producing and distributing movies from some of the greatest filmmakers, had very few misfires because they always kept a tight lid on their budgets.
Oh yeah, I mean the original Rocky was like $1 million, and they had to fight for that.
And how much did Rocky wind up making?
Zillion, billion, jillion dollars.
I think the official term is cudgillion.
A cudgillion, yes.
Which, if you look it up in Google search, that means shitload.
Yeah, so. Which I don't think that actually Stallone made any of. It was like all United Artists made that money, I'm pretty sure.
Well, yeah. Stallone wasn't really anything yet. That movie made him something. That movie turned him into a huge star, a huge filmmaker, he was already a writer. I mean, do you remember there's a movie that he did with Henry Winkler and Perry King. It was called The Lords of Flatbush.
Yeah, I remember they showed it on TV a lot during the
Rocky
Rocky
years.
He
wrote that damn movie. People make fun of Sly a lot. He's Sly.
I love him.
But the guy he's incredible. He's a filmmaker, a good one. He's a good filmmaker. He's a good writer. That script for Rocky. And
all these lots of he always had to fight for like certain scenes. He had to be like, no, we want to do it this way, and they would always, the studio people. Now I don't think the director. I think the director John Avildsen. I think he pretty much agreed with him what was supposed to be done. But the studio people were always fighting him on everything. And
Avildsen had a good relationship with him because he respected him as a writer, and a lot of people didn't really respect Stallone. They've got the Bond movies. Rocky is shaping up to be a franchise. Woody Allen is a client, and he's making some of the best movies he ever made. Woody Allen's strongest films were early on, and he made fantastic movies. He made
it's like Stardust Memories with the particularly early, funnier movies.
Yeah. He would make movies like Bananas, Everything You Ever always wanted to know about sex, but we're afraid to ask. Love and Death, Sleeper, Annie Hall. And it's
you got more. So as you start with Annie Hall, it starts to get kind of a little more serious, and then he does Manhattan.
Now, now I believe Stardust Memories is his last movie for United Artists, right? Because after that, he made Midsummer Night's Sex Comedy, which was Orion.
He moves over to Orion, yeah.
Yeah, and he moved with Arthur Krim when they left. This was what happened, I guess. After the success, executives can't really handle success, can they? And they can't handle it when their company is bought by another company. Transamerica, which was an insurance company, winds up buying United Artists. And their executives are now calling all the shots. And Arthur Krim, Robert Benjamin, and a couple other people didn't like this. 5 executives, I believe, from United Artists. So they left. They left United Artists. They said, I don't know what the logic was behind it, because UA was still doing what it had always done, which was give the power to the directors, to the actors, to let them do it. Let the creative types handle the movies. We'll handle the money, and you handle the movies. Their major mistake was a little movie we like to call Heaven's Gate. I have watched this documentary, and I know everything about the history of this movie. I read the book upon which that documentary was based. It was called Final Cut, The Making of Heaven's Gate, The Unmaking of a Studio by Stephen Beck, who is profiled in the movie, in the documentary that was made for Trio. You remember that cable channel, Trio?
Yeah, but I didn't even have it. I think it was one of those exclusive on DirecTV kind of channels that you could get.
We had it. We
You had it? Okay. It was maybe on a few cable systems. We didn't have it, though.
But it was only around for, like, what, 2 years? Something like that? It like disappeared.
It was around for a little while. It was around for maybe a few years, I think.
Well, they went and produced quite a good documentary about it. Unfortunately, it's a little bit slanted. It's a
hatchet job against Michael Cimino.
I don't really think so. I disagree. I think they were very kind to Cimino. I think
they were still mean.
They were kind, and they kind of point out like some of the flaws in UA's logic, I guess. But this is the problem with the movie. It starts at the beginning. United Artists is not used to spending anything over a certain amount of money for movies. And Cimino said that he was going to make a movie on a budget that was reasonable. $7 million is what he said. He said, I can do this for $7 million. And it's like of his own hand, he writes a script that on the surface looks interesting. It looks like it might be good, but even $7 million just seems like too much money for me. Because look at Rocky, you mentioned $1 million budget. It winds up becoming a best picture, wins Oscars.
And then they're able to spend more money on Rocky 2 because it's kind of they can do like pre-sales. They have like guaranteed money that they can make, so they know that. And it's the same with the James Bond films of, okay, so the budgets.
These are built-in bank accounts
budgets,
right there.
Even the budgets, like the budgets up to say like early Roger Moore's, the budgets were still hovering only around like $9-10 million. So like half of that is United Artists money. That's still only $5 million for a guaranteed, like close to $100 million.
These were the early Bond films.
They would make money.
The early Bond films I know were medium budget.
Orion Pictures, they didn't even have a ton of flops. They just didn't like have a lot of like movies that made like a ton of money. And when you have a company like that, you almost need hit after hit after hit just to maintain the company. Even though United Artists was having trouble, it's part of Transamerica, so to them it's just a blip.
Right. And the documentary tries to make this point that after Krim and Benjamin left, formed Orion, United Artists was solely just a bunch of mid-level executives running it. Mm-hmm. And Transamerica would on occasion come in and say, oh, okay, how much are you spending? How much is this going to cost? What do you want to do? They pick up Michael Cimino after he wins his Oscars. They finance the Johnson County Range Borer movie that he wanted to do. This is where they run into their problems because he's already spending money and he hasn't even started filming. Watching the documentary, they talk about Camp Cimino, which is like they went out to Wyoming, and then he's doing horse riding classes for his actors. He's doing and this is all on company time. Cimino's a very talented guy. Unfortunately, he doesn't know what he's doing. You can be talented and not know what the hell you're doing. He's spending too much money in pre-production. He's teaching his actors to do a bunch of things, which if I were directing the film, I would have said, we're thinking of making a Western. Go off and get some riding lessons. Go off and get some dancing lessons. Go off and get some roller skating lessons or something like that. And then meet me in Wyoming and we'll make a movie. Or Montana, I forgot where they were shooting.
Well, also, when I think of like just logistically, I think like, you have an opportunity to make the movie that you want to make. Play nice.
That's another thing. He was extremely antagonistic to the people who were giving him money.
Don't overplay your hand. Be
Are you going to do that?
Them.
Are you going to seriously? I mean, like if they gave you $10 million to make a movie. Are you going to treat them like crap? I mean, these are the guys.
Kidding?
With
I'd pocket 5.
You pocket
quietly.
I would drop to my knees and pleasure these men as much as I could. To thank them for the opportunity of being able to do this. I mean,
and I try to make the best movie I could. And I mean, people don't understand in Hollywood. I mean, if you're nice and you play nice and you play by the rules and you're a yes man,
they'll remember that, and you'll wind up getting more work, right?
Try and make the best movie that you can. You get a reputation as someone that's easy to work with, and you'll always work.
Yes. Instead, this guy was like, he was telling executives to go fuck themselves. I mean, they didn't like Isabelle Huppert in the lead role. And really, when you look at her in the movie, she's beautiful to look at. Of course, she runs around naked half the time in that film, but you can't understand a word she's saying because she's French. She's got a very heavy French accent. I can't understand half the things a lot of these people are saying. He had everything his way. He had a producer that was a friend who didn't really produce, and he wanted everything that he wanted. He wanted to build, and it cost too much money, and that's not how UA worked. UA was they were in the Woody Allen business where a movie costs $5 million and produces a profit of 30. I'm reminded, I always have in the back of my head, Roger Ebert's review for Heaven's Gate. And again, he's not reviewing the movie. He's reviewing the production of the movie. He did what Vincent Canby did. He called it $36 million thrown to the winds. This is what he said. He said that it's not a beautiful movie to look at, which is patently untrue. The photography of that movie is it's only saving grace as far as I'm concerned. Turn down the sound and just look at the photography, and it's gorgeous.
The funny thing is, okay, we'll even say it's $40 million, okay? That's $40 million in 1980 dollars. Right. So we're talking maybe at the most maybe $150 million. Well,
let's check. Let's check the adjusted inflation.
Adjusted. It couldn't be more than $150 million.
$118 million. Yeah.
Okay. Now, how many movies cost that today? A lot. Comedies cost this much money.
Well, if you're looking to shoot it on that scope, yes.
And the fact you couldn't make a big movie like that so complicatedly for that cheap today. When you think about it.
No, you couldn't. But no, well, okay, I have it here in my notes. I wrote this. I even if this was the greatest movie ever made, it was absolutely inexcusable for the budget to soar the way it did. This movie could have been shot in 1979, 1980 for less than $5 million with a smaller crew, easily accessible locations, that's another thing, less speaking parts, and an experienced producer.
Yeah, but wouldn't it kind of look like an episode of Little House on the Prairie then?
It kind of looks like one now. I mean, it's like a big budget version of Little House on the Prairie.
Now, we discussed this before the show. I actually saw this movie like about a month and a half ago. It's actually not bad. I might even give it like a marginal thumbs up just because it gives you a feeling. It gives you a sort of sense of a time, and it is very well made. My problem with it is it's long, of course, but it's also got this sort of story structure where I was confused.
Yeah.
Where it starts off like it's kind of a flashback, sort of. Where it starts off where everybo's supposed to be young, but they're all like actually in their late 30s. But they're supposed to be.
He graduated from Harvard, which is not actually Harvard, it's Oxford.
Which is actually a good. It's actually I thought it was an interesting and it was a good scene, but it doesn't really fit with the rest of the movie. And then they have the whole movie, and then
he's trying to create this. He's trying to create an epic story here about something that was considered a minor footnote in American history. The dialogue is really dumb, especially the way Cimino writes immigrants is terrible. They've got these ridiculous accents. And also he's trying to spread that liberal message of just how cruel, the rich can be to the poor. Obviously we don't need to be told that. What I would have wanted to see more would be more commercial. Westerns at the time were dead. No one was making Westerns. And
so you're saying it should have been more like something like a Silverado come in, have John Cleese come in. Hey, what is going on here?
It should have some. It had no humor in it either. I mean, it's like if there was any humor, there should have been more humor. I wanted to see more of a connection. I wanted to see more of the triangle between the three leads. There's a really funny line that I think one of the executives said to Cimino in the book. Because they found Isabelle Huppert so unattractive, they said the audience is just going to want to fuck Walken and Christopherson and leave her alone. So that's pretty. What you need to do is consider your audience. If you're interested in the story about the making of Heaven's Gate, I know David and I bitch about it a few times here. I urge you to seek out Final Cut, The Making of Heaven's Gate and the Unmaking of a Studio by Stephen Beck. You can find it on Amazon.com. It's a great book. There's a lot in there that they couldn't get into in the documentary because it's just a big, thick mother of a book.
It's the Heaven's Gate of books about Heaven's Gate.
Very much so. So the now defunct Trio Cable Channel produced the documentary based on it with some decent interviews, but it's more of a Cliff Notes version of the much more detailed book. You can find that on YouTube. It's available.
That thing was kind of long too.
It was long. It was a great little intro into it. It's a little too. I feel it leans a little too much to, saying, "Oh, poor Michael Cimino. All he wanted to do was make a good movie and all this and that." But there are some interesting bits in there about how the media pretty much controls everything. Don't piss off the media.
No, don't.
So then now let's move forward. Now this causes UA to kind of default on a few. There was a lot of ill will generated. Remember Brad Dourif talked about that. There was a lot of ill will generated because Michael Cimino's movie was taking up all of UA's money, and nobody else could get their movies greenlighted, their projects greenlighted. So everyone kept abandoning UA. This lowered UA's stock price, not necessarily Transamerica, because as a multi-billion-dollar corporation, they're always making money no matter what, and they're in the insurance racket. So what happens is Transamerica cuts UA loose. It gets bought by MGM. And that happens in 1981. David Begelman was the the president of MGM at the time, but MGM produced nothing but flops around that time, right? Mm-hmm. And this was before Poltergeist came out, which was a big hit. But he was fired in July of '82 before the film was even out. And Poltergeist really kind of only got made because Spielberg was. Put it together and brought it to them, and
that's a whole other conversation about did he direct it? Did Tobe Hooper direct it? Who
of the many theories I've read? Number one, Spielberg was not permitted to direct the film because he had a contract at the time with Paramount. He had a Paramount deal to do Indiana Jones, and part of his deal with Raiders was that he couldn't direct any other films for any other studios. So
he did E.T. He did E.T.
But that was '82 though, and he was with Universal at that.
Oh, okay.
After he was done with his duty with Raiders, he went on to E.T. He was not permitted to direct Poltergeist, so he selected Tobe Hooper, kept him under close supervision the way Lucas kept Richard Marquand under close supervision for Jedi. There are a couple of moments in there that are truly Spielbergian, but I do believe that it is mainly Tobe Hooper's movie, because. Look at Poltergeist and compare it to another movie that we're going to talk about shortly called Lifeforce.
Yes.
Yes. Exactly. See, you look at Lifeforce and you say, that's Poltergeist 1 right there.
It is. Although I think a lot of it is...
Lifeforce. Can I say, I love Lifeforce. I love that movie.
I do too. I love it too.
Love the hell out of it.
It's even better, and there's actually weirdly how... The version that most people see now is not the version that we saw when it came out originally. Like the Lifeforce was cut down and re-edited and rescored partially with a Michael Kamen musical score. It's if you get an early Vestron video version of that, it says Canon Films and
what music are you talking about for Lifeforce? Because the piece of music that I remember is dun 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 dun.
This doesn't start with that. It does not start with that. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that's not the version.
Was that Jerry Goldsmith who did that?
No, it's not. It's Mancini, Henry Mancini.
Oh, Henry Mancini. Okay.
And what happened was when it was originally released, I guess '85. It comes out and it's cut down a little bit. It's got a Michael Kamen score. They cut off the first 10 minutes of the movie. They start it right when the astronauts are in the sort of the craft.
Yeah, that weird umbrella looking thing.
It's as they're going in. They start it there. And they go in, and it's got a Michael Kamen kind of almost Highlander-ish score, and he's going through, and it's got slightly different music throughout. And I think they use some of the Mancini score. It might actually end with that music.
This really, Lifeforce was a mind blower to me because you have a naked vampire chick running around. I mean, nobody cares. You know, she's just running around topless.
She's like she's completely 19. Naked. She's 19. She's like already like an athletic.
She's beautiful. Like, she sucks the soul right out of you. Steve Railsback is running around like a lunatic. No, and Patrick Stewart running around.
Yeah, with a little bit of hair. Talking about hair, he's still got a kind of a little bit of his hair on the sides anyway.
Lifeforce is actually, appropriately, it is a zombie movie.
Yeah, it's a zombie title and a zombie movie.
So can I say, the first time I ever saw Lifeforce was part of it was actually on television. It was on syndicated television that I first saw the movie.
Oh, that probably was the cut down version then.
But it was
cut down and then re-edited probably because of all the nudity.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, now you know that you remember when in the mid 80s up to the early 90s, maybe up to 92, the studios syndicated movies, and they did it. Universal had the Universal Debut Network. MGM had their own debut network as well, where they would show movies that they made or their company made or produced or distributed. A couple of other companies, I believe, also Fox, Embassy, and they would put these movies on regular syndicated television. So yes, this movie was chopped to ribbons, and also she walked around. I mean, we knew she was naked, right? But for some reason, they put these two little furry, out of focus dots on her boobs.
Yeah.
So she was walking around, and these boobs, these little dots, these censored.
You know, it's weird. Somehow that actually makes it hotter because you just want to see.
Oh
what's
yeah,
going on there.
Definitely. But I remember being absolutely enthralled by it. It was so big and over the top in that way that some of the gorier, special effecty aspects of Poltergeist were. The Lifeforce was very similar to that. That's why I say that it's mainly Tobe Hooper's film. I know that Spielberg likes to throw in. He had his own touches, obviously. Really, I mean, I know Spielberg was loaded with energy and probably other substances at the time, but I doubt that he could actually pull off directing for other people.
All I know is that
himself.
post all this going on, all Tobe Hooper could get was a 3-picture deal with Canon Films, and then nothing. And then he's obviously like a talented guy, even though those movies weren't necessarily the most popular.
He's wonderful. I enjoy Tobe Hooper, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then those sequels that came out were fantastic. Also, The Funhouse, I really enjoyed that. Salem's Lot, he directed for television. He's a great director.
And then nothing. All I can guess is maybe he had some personal problems and couldn't do things. That's all I can think.
Maybe he's just not that kind of guy. I mean, like, there's some people that are survivors and some people aren't. Maybe he's just one of these people who can't get his movies made, like a John Landis type or something like that.
Maybe.
Let's move into 1985. August 7th, Turner Broadcasting System offered to buy MGM UA as film licensing to television became more complicated. Ted Turner saw the value of acquiring MGM's film library. This is what he wanted. He wanted to acquire the film library for WTBS. He wound up having to buy the whole company outright for $1.5 billion, but I don't understand how these multi-billionaires don't have any money. They looked at his books. They said, your companies, all the companies you own, owe too much money to other people. And he says, okay, I'll give you back the company, but let me have the library. And they said, deal. So because of the debt load of his companies, he sold MGM's production and distribution assets to United Artists, which was in turn owned by, I believe, a man named Jack Hakorian. And then the MGM lot and lab facilities were sold to Lormar. And Alan Ladd Jr. wound up becoming the CEO of MGM in 1991.
So you're saying, in a weird way, United Artists got bought by MGM, and then eventually MGM got bought by United Artists.
Just their production assets.
Okay.
Like whatever they had. Like, here's some lights, United Artists. There you go. $300 million, please. And we're like, okay, here you go. But this was after everybody had left. Everybody had been left and or fired after Heaven's Gate. So what happens after that? After that, we start... Well, first, I did want to make mention of the several movies that were made that, for some reason, wind up being distributed by other companies on video. War Games being one of them. For some reason, War Games was released 4 or 5 different times into 4 or 5 different distribution companies.
Yeah, it's on CBS Fox Video. It's on MGM UA. There was weirdness going on. These were mostly on disc formats. Because I don't think that there's an MGM UA on tape War Games. I don't think.
Yeah,
but there is one on like Laserdisc.
I was looking around. I was trying to find a big box. That's the characteristic of MGM UA home video, was this big box release. It was a bigger box than usual. I think it was roughly, maybe it was slightly bigger than the Warner clamshell. It was a box. It opened up very much like the old Warner Brothers big boxes did. And it had like a little thing inside. You put the tape in there. It's kind of like this, I guess, metallic gray kind of a thing, or silver.
Yeah.
Is that what they were trying to ape? Or
yeah,
something along those lines. Usually very good covers, but again, you can't find them in very good condition because of all the wear and tear necessary with opening them and everything. And all the Bond movies were being released on CBS Fox at that time, right?
Yes, but here I'm actually on. I'm on the webpage because I wanted to have this as a reference.
Mm-hmm.
So let me go to USA, and I'm on Laserdiscs now. CBS Fox. There are a couple of actual movies. You can actually get Octopussy on MGM UA home video on a laser video disc.
Okay.
But you can't get
That's
it on
domestically,
MGM,
right?
That's domestically, but this is
because I do know in Japan, for some reason, Warner Brothers had the right to release the Bond movies.
Yeah, because they had the United Artists. They released all United Artists films on Warner, and in Europe too, and just sort of the international version.
MGM was responsible for creating a monumental movement by introducing a letterbox movie on VHS. Per the wishes of Woody Allen, when Manhattan was released, it was released in its letterboxed Panavision format. It was actually shot in Panavision. In a weird
sort of proto letterbox format of it was kind of, usually you get black bars on the top and bottom. This had gray. This was had gray bars on the top and bottom.
Yeah, that. See, I found it interesting that it was shot. This is when I first began to realize that movies were a certain aspect ratio, right? Mm-hmm. And when I looked at the Manhattan VHS tape, I was like, oh wow, there's a lot going on here. This is obviously meant to, he wanted to preserve the compositions that his director of photography.
If I'm not mistaken, it's a slightly fudged widescreen too, where it's not. Oh yeah. It's not quite wide enough, and it's a little bit squished.
What they did, exactly. That's interesting that you mentioned that, because I wasn't thinking about it at the time when it was released on video. TV sets, I guess, were still too small to really kind of accept this new kind of format. So it is squished slightly. It's slightly wider than 185:1. Yeah, but you can tell it is squished.
It's like a 2.4:1 film that is like squished to about a 2:1.
Yeah.
But it's like kind of stretched, so you don't really necessarily lose stuff on the side. So it's slightly squished, slightly letterbox. It's kind of like the worst of both worlds, really.
Yeah. The best.
I'm sure later versions are like properly done.
Yeah. The best later, maybe about when it was first released, so 1992, in a re-release, they removed the gray bars, they put in the black bars instead, and they actually, because 92 through to the end of the 20th century. Mm-hmm. We were seeing a lot more widescreen films on videotape. So and the television broadcasts were also corrected for that too. But yeah, that first big gray box of Manhattan, it's not the correct aspect ratio, but it still was incredible for the time to see that.
And it gave people ideas. So it kind of like opened the door for, we can release our movies this way too. So then you get into the Criterion stuff a few years later.
Yeah, Woody Allen was very much kind of like doing this Orson Welles thing, where no one was to touch that film. That was basically like how Welles dealt with Citizen Kane. He said nobody touches Kane. Woody Allen has always been like this. This movie was always seen in a widescreen format. It was never seen in a pan and scan.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
And Stephen Bach tells a story in his book about going to see. He liked to go see the movies that his company made in the theater with people, and he said that was the last great experience he had looking at a United Artists film, was seeing Manhattan.
MGM CBS was sort of the in-between of MGM being on home video, which I don't know if they started out as just MGM home video or if they started out as MGM CBS home video. but I think that they just started out as MGM CBS home video in like 1980, 1981, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you would have like your mostly your MGM titles, because they hadn't even bought United Artists at the time. So it was your MGM titles, a few here and there, and they would.
Started in 1979, ran from 1980 to 1982.
Okay, and then there was a shakeup because CBS, which was part of MGM CBS, would then become CBS Fox, leaving MGM to just be MGM home video for I think a little while, maybe, before they became MGM UA home video when they bought United Artists, and then they were MGM they were MGM UA home video for 10 years, like into the 90s. I think
from 1982 to, let's say, 1982 to 1990.
Well, they always had, even when they were MGM CBS, they had that kind of big box. So they did that until 87, 88, until they kind of finally went into the like whatever everybody kind of standardized the sort of the regular box.
They've got that kind of retro MGM logo that was created specifically for 2001: A Space Odyssey. Kubrick wanted the movie to look futuristic in every way, so he asked them to design a modern or a futuristic logo for it. So they created this futuristic lion with an MGM under it.
Yeah, it doesn't open with the standard line. It opens with this sort of special logo at the beginning. Now that I'm thinking about it, that's interesting.
Yes.
So
again, one of the more instantly recognizable, iconic logos, right up there with like Columbia. This one was a lion, and his name was Leo, I guess.
You have MGM CBS. They actually have the film My Fair Lady. Is an MGM CBS. It's actually on MGM CBS. It's probably one of the first releases.
Right. There's also a couple here as it merges, because I see Al Pacino's in Cruising, and that was a CBS title a little later, but originally it was CBS Video for MGM.
And then eventually your CBS titles, your titles that are owned by CBS and are on MGM CBS, when they become part of CBS Fox instead. So now My Fair Lady is on Fox 20. It's on like MGM. It's on CBS Fox Video for a while.
Right.
My Fair Lady. Then eventually, when Fox is just Fox Video and CBS is not a part of it, but CBS is bought by like Paramount, and they merge or something.
Right.
Now it's on like Paramount Home Video. So it's like one of those zombie titles where it starts off on MGM CBS, goes to CBS Fox, and now it's a Paramount title. That's really weird. So it's just weird. It's like if Better Off Dead had been released in 1980, it would have been an MGM CBS video first.
Yes.
Before it was put on Key. I have like a title that came out in 88. It was like something that was a collector's item until it wasn't. The Laserdisc of Yellow Submarine that came out in 1988.
From MGM?
From MGM.
Was this
MGM,
part of
MGM UA was a United Artists film.
Okay.
Because by the late 80s, it was really weird how some titles that were MGM or MGM UA or whatever you want to call them were still on CBS Fox. But yet, slowly into the 80s, certain titles, including the James Bond movies, were started to pop up on MGM UA home video in like 1988.
Oh, okay.
They kind of re-released them. Although the newer movies must not have been affected by it, because License to Kill came out in late 1989 on CBS Fox.
Well, this is one thing I can share with you. I don't know if you've had the same situation as I had. I own several MGM home video laserdiscs. Let's see some of the classics. The one I can really remember, I have Lolita, the original, and I have The Hunger.
Ooh!
And the one thing I can tell you about these is very well made. They were manufactured very well. They were very, very nice presentations, very nice packages. The earlier ones have the kind of design of that big box, right? It's like the flat gray or whatever.
Yeah, they're flat gray. They're square, but they're like laserdiscs, so they're square. But it's like almost like a laserdisc version of those boxes.
Right. Now this is the one key between all of the discs that I owned that were made for MGM UA home video is that they're all very good quality. Have you had that same experience? Have you had any problems with yours?
No, they're all like this kind of goes back to like around this time everything was was done by Pioneer. Pioneer pretty much was the only company making the discs. And any sort of disc that you get, especially if it's like a mid-late 80s release and it's pressed at Pioneer, you're good. You're solid. No rot, no nothing, no problems.
Even for their earlier ones too, though.
That's interesting because they were having a bit of a Pioneer was having a bit of a rot problem early on, just because they were still kind of get the stank of the DiscoVision plant off and try and like do it properly.
Right.
But so if you've got like a mid 80s, early 80s pressing from just because it came out early, it's an early movie doesn't necessarily mean it was pressed then, because they would always do a lot of repressings. So you might have like a late 80s pressing.
I think I bought a used one. I had a used. Oh, what was it? I think it's actually Tarzan, the Bo Derek Tarzan.
Ooh.
And it was very old. It was a very old pressing. It's like 1983 or something, and it was I think it was still full frame. It wasn't even like widescreen or anything like that.
No, they wouldn't have done that then.
It was just a full frame, and it still played beautifully. And I bought it for $1. You know,
good deal.
Somebody was trying to get rid of all their discs or something because I guess DVD was coming in. But it seemed it was wonderful, no problems. And I looking at the disc recently, I didn't see any spots on it or anything like that.
Nope. If it's kind of like if you have a disc where if it plays now, you're good. If it played say 10, if it's like a few years removed from when you got it and it still plays, it's probably not going to get worse. Warner Brothers took over distribution of their product. Now they would still be on MGM, UA Home Video. They would still like say MGM on them, but they were distributed by whatever company did the distribution for Warner Brothers. And that's like part of the reason why when you have that initial rollout of DVD, and it's like Warner Brothers was like a huge part of the rollout of DVD in general, and their first wave of titles were a lot of MGM titles, and they even have those. I have an MGM title that's like in that snap case, like those old snap case DVD boxes.
Which is that the kind with that had like the flap, and you would pull the flap up.
Flap, and you think it was made of cardboard, and
Warner Brothers had those too for its.
Yeah, and it's because they were distributed by Warner Brothers, and that's why it was like all the same thing. I got GoldenEye, which was a James Bond, the most recent James Bond movie. That's the first DVD
and that
I
had
bought.
that little plastic lid.
It had the flap thing, yeah. And it was actually like this interesting sort of. You could watch. It was a dual layer.
Oh, was that? You
could watch.
Was there any like delay in MGM's entry into DVD? Because around that time, when the DVD started to be manufactured, this is when they had their enormous problems. They had boardroom problems. They had just again for money that they really didn't have. They wound up picking up. Orion Pictures, the Goldwyn Company, and the Motion Picture Corporation of America, $573 million, and this begins the end phase of MGM, where it becomes more about just buying companies and for their libraries, and then
they get their library, and then they can make money
slapping
on
their
that
imprimatur
way.
on it. When we did the Paul Verhoeven episode of Extreme Cinema. I didn't have a copy of RoboCop handy, so I found it at Stop and Shop for $5, for which I paid $2 and change because I had my Stop and Shop club card, and it's made by MGM's DVD division.
All the James Bond movies are released by United Artists until basically United Artists like kind of just dies. Kind of like right there as part of MGM.
Let's say that's 1982, 1983?
Way later.
Okay, that's right, because Octopussy is still technically United Artists. What about View to a Kill? Where does
View
that
to
go?
a Kill is United. No, I'm going into Pierce Brosnan years actually.
Okay, so we're going into, and then there's after that you have what's his name? The next guy. Timothy Dalton.
Timothy Dalton, but
right.
We're still United Artists. We're still United Artists.
And that's The Living Daylights and License to Kill, and then we move. And those two movies, okay, the thing about it, I mean, those movies actually were very popular overseas, not as popular in the United States, but they made a lot of money overseas. Right.
Not bad. A $30 million budget. You're making a ton of money. And then, of course, you sell them on video. You sell them to cable. You sell them to TV. They're always making money on these things. Even when they're not making a ton of money, they're still making a lot of money.
Yes.
And then they get to GoldenEye. And then you have Tomorrow Never Dies is the last United Artists James Bond film, the next one, The World Is Not Enough, starts with an MGM logo. But then you have Casino Royale, which is it's basically MGM in name only, because it's basically co-produced by the Broccoli family and Sony, because it is the bargaining chip that they have that keeps the company barely alive.
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to negotiate with some company to get the most amount of money, and it's either going to be Sony again, and they're going to have to pay out of their ass, or it's going to be Warner Brothers. And if the Broccoli family was smart, they would just buy MGM. Then they have their own studio to just release these movies.
Oh, and then they would have the enormous library.
They would own all of them. They would sort of anytime these things come out on video, I think there's always some sort of side deal that has to get negotiated with them, and it is a very sort of interesting thing where they actually owned less before. They only owned, I guess, like really a quarter, because it was originally produced by two people. It was produced by Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman.
Yes.
But Harry Saltzman had to sell his interest to Cubby Broccoli because Harry Saltzman was a really bad businessman and couldn't keep his money together, and he gambled and he
I was going to say he's probably a gambler, because those guys love to play with money.
And he was like a loud, kind of annoying guy, and so he just couldn't get it together. So he ended up having to sell his interest to, wait a minute, I just realized he sold his interest to United Artists. I'm remembering this now. Yeah. So Saltzman, United Artists, or by extension MGM now, owns 75% of that.
Now they're known more as a library. And this is a list of everything they own.
A library that Ted Turner owned, and now a library that Warner Brothers owns, I think, or Warner Communications or something.
Yes. You have United Artists, of course, including Monogram Pictures, Orion Pictures, including Filmways, American International, and MCEG Sterling Entertainment, the Samuel Goldwyn Company, North American distribution rights to the Rank Organization, Motion Picture Corporation of America, Polygram Filmed Entertainment, including Virgin Films, Palace Pictures, Island Pictures, Atlantic Entertainment Group. I always wanted to know what happened to those people, and now I know.
Oh, Atlantic Entertainment. I remember that.
Clubhouse Pictures, the CDR Epic Library, Castle Rock Entertainment, Hemdale Film Corporation, Sherwood Productions and Gladden Entertainment, Nelson Entertainment, including Galactic Films, Spikings Corporation, which is very interesting because Barry Spikings ran EMI, Empire International Pictures, including... yes, remember them? Empire?
Yes!
Including Urban Classics, yes. Urban Classics and the Canon Group and 21st Century Film Corporation. In total, I think it's roughly, 15,000 films altogether? Let's wrap this one up. This is a lot of fun and a lot of work. My God.
We talked, and I don't think we even scratched the surface.
We didn't even scratch it. This is going to have to be 2 episodes, I think. I don't know.
My lady, please.
There's a lot of stuff in there, but a lot of fun, and thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Baby, look at me and tell me what you see. You ain't seen the best of me yet. Give me time, I'll make you forget the rest. I got more of me, and you can set it free. I can catch the moon in my hand. Don't you know who I am? Remember my name. Hey, I'm gonna live forever. I'm gonna learn how to fly. I feel it coming together. People will see me and cry. Hey, I'm gonna make it to heaven. Light up the sky like a flame. I'm gonna live forever. Baby, remember my name. Remember.
Turn that shit off, man. What's wrong with you, man? Get the other record. Damn.